Hey guys, it's Ben here at the Strength Factory. Today I'm going to explain to you how to taper so that you can be at your best for a race, a trip, a riding weekend or holiday. First of all then, what is a taper? Well, it's just jargon for going through a process in the run up to a race or event or even a holiday where you alter your training, your activity levels and maybe your recovery so you turn up at that race or event feeling as good as possible. Why is it important? Well, it's pretty obvious really. If you're entering a race, you want to do as well as possible. And if you spent loads of money to go on a riding trip, then you don't want to turn up with sore legs and really tired. Okay, so it's just about making changes in the run up to these things so you can get the most out of your racing or riding. Before we go into the specifics, let's look at a few general principles. The first one is that it's very much a balancing act between coming in fresh, i.e. rested, so your body doesn't have, you're not carrying fatigue or soreness or anything, and what I would call sharpness. And being sharp on the bike is kind of about two things. It's about your skills, okay, being like really at home and feeling like you're really riding well, but it's also about being physically sharp. And if you've had too long off the bike, for instance, too much rest, then you lose that kind of sharpness, that top end, and you'll find your heart rate is going to spike a bit quicker than maybe it would if you were riding more regularly. And that's not what you want, especially if we're talking about racing, cross-country, enduro, or even downhill. So it's a balancing act between, if I take too much rest and recovery, I turn up very fresh, but maybe not too sharp. If I maybe do some, quite a lot in the run up, maybe I feel really sharp on my skills and I've got a bit of snap, but actually I'm going to start to feel fatigue through the day or through the event. Okay, so we've got to balance out the two. The second principle to think of really is, like anything, is everybody is different. Okay, and so what you're going to have to do is, if you're serious about your racing and you really want to taper to peak for a couple of key events through the year, is just test out this process. So maybe you're racing in June, July, August, maybe in April, May, in the spring, you do a test week where you work up to like a weekend riding or something. And then you get a good gauge, like, how did I feel on that weekend? Did I feel really good? Did I feel like if it was a race I could perform? Or did I feel tired? Or did I feel sluggish? And then you can make adjustments. The second thing in terms of the individualization aspect here is that, again, as a general rule, the fitter and the higher level athlete we're talking about, the more they will do in the run up to the race, because for them, they can tolerate a big training load. They're used to riding loads. And for them, that sharpness is super important, and turning up with too much rest, they usually don't like it as well. At the other end of the spectrum, we've got people who are less fit, and if the event or trip, if a big obstacle on that trip is like the distance or duration, and you're worried about your fitness, then I'd say those people need to rest more in the run up to an event, because turning up fresh without any fatigue in your body is going to be more important. So we've got a bit of a sliding scale. In general then, in the run up to the race, we want to try and maintain the intensity of our training sessions. And what I mean by intensity is, if you're going to do some sprints, you do sprints, they're high intensity, but we're going to reduce the volume, i.e. you might do less sprints or shorter sprints or have longer rest in between to help your recovery in between. So what we could do there in that example is, in the run up to the race, you're doing the sprints to keep you sharp, to keep those like high threshold muscle fibers like firing so you're ready to race, but we're maybe going to do 3 or 4 sprints spaced out instead of 6 or 8 sprints that are longer and take more out of you that you might have done a few weeks before. Similarly, in the gym, you can lift heavy on race week, but maybe just do 1 set of 2 or 3 deadlifts instead of 3 or 4 sets of 5 or something like that. So we're greatly reducing the volume of work we're doing, but we're maintaining the intensity. Again, this is individualized. If you are used to lifting heavy and training regularly, then you can tolerate that. If you don't currently strength train, don't think, oh, I need to do a heavy deadlift on race week, because then that's obviously going to have a massive detrimental effect on you. Okay, it's about doing what is relative to what you're used to doing. So you take your current training load, like what do I normally do in a week, and you back off the volume, so the total amount. So maybe you don't ride as far in the week before, but you can still ride quite hard, okay, assuming you think you can recover before the race. So we've talked a little bit there about how we need to maintain intensity but reduce volume in the run-up. Now let's talk about the frequency of training. So how often do you train? Well, you start with obviously what you normally do, and then it's about weighing up like where you're at and how much time you've got. So for instance, like a pro elite rider, they might not really reduce the frequency of training except to allow for the fact that they're traveling. So maybe a travel day takes out a riding day, but other than that, you're going to see a lot of Enduro Series racers, they're going to be out and they're going to be still pedaling 500-600 meter day the day before practice at an EWS, because to them that isn't a big deal, and that helps to keep them sharp, to keep the fitness up through the season and so on. At the other end of the scale, you've got the recreational riders, and especially if you're balancing sort of life and family and things like that before going away for a weekend, certainly it's the case with me, is I have to reduce the frequency in the run up because I need to get on top of work, clear the inbox and all the grown-up stuff, and maybe I'm not then going to see my wife and kids for a few days, so I want to make sure I'm at home in the evening for bath time and stuff and not away training, and then I need to do all the admin in the evenings after work to get ready to go away. So you kind of naturally end up having less frequency of riding or training anyway, and certainly for me personally, having an extra day off or two in the run-up, I feel really benefits me as I go into the race. And I'd suggest that as you get older, okay, I'm 42, the extra rest days are going to be more beneficial than for the younger guys in their 20s. Let's just take a little look then at an example training week on the run up to either a weekend away or a race. Let's start on the weekend before the event. That weekend, maybe typically you'd go out for a big Sunday ride, with your mates or whatever, and maybe on a typical week you do 12 to 1500 meters of riding. Well, the first thing is, if you're not a pro rider, just do what's fun. It's not the end of the world if you do 1000 or 1200, but if you've got a bit of flexibility or you're riding on your own, then just back it off a little bit, do a couple hundred meters less vertical climbing on that ride, so it just takes a little bit less out of the tank, and then make sure you prioritize your recovery with good food, good hydration, good sleep, get on the foam roller and do some mobility, because that is going to add up through the week. Next day then, on the Monday, potentially on a Monday start of the week, you're just going to have a chilled out ride or spin, or maybe a rest day, but again, get on that mobility. Okay, Tuesday, gym. That's when a lot of my guys tend to train, so recover from the weekend, get in the gym on a Tuesday, and on that Tuesday, let's reduce the total number of sets and reps we're doing. So maybe it's a bit of a shorter session, but if you're used to lifting heavy, then still go heavy. If you're in a power phase, then still do powerful moves like box jumps, or moving powerful squats, goblet squat or back squat or kettlebell swings. Still do them powerfully and maximally if you're able to safely, but just reduce the total amount and use the extra time you've got to have a little spin of the legs, maybe the foam roller, maybe the massage gun, so you walk out of there feeling really good. The Wednesday then tends to be something like an hour to hour and a half spin, and during that ride we're then going to hit some high intensity efforts. Generally I'd go for some sort of sprint, okay, where it's like absolute maximal sprint, like you're being chased by a tiger, but not long enough to get a big burn in the legs. And again, 3 or 4 sprints is fine, spread through the ride, keeps you sharp, but doesn't take too much out of the tank. At this point then, the Thursday, Friday, certainly for me, and like the everyday rider, that tends to be more about Thursday, admin, sort my bike, sort my kit, sort my food for the weekend, and my final planning, do a little mobility and foam rolling if you can, and then Friday would tend to be work followed by travel, and then ideally go for a little spin after the drive or after the travel to loosen up, especially if it's been a long drive in the van. And then it's race weekend, time to dominate, get off the brakes, send it and have a great time. There you go then, tapering made simple. The bottom line is that you need to find an approach that works for you That means you turn up on race day feeling your absolute best. For some of you, that's going to be a very active week. For some of you, it'll be a week focusing more on resting and recovery. Remember, if you are on the rest and recovery kind of approach, and you're doing it a lot of times throughout the summer or throughout the year for lots of trips or lots of events, then actually, you know, you're missing a lot of training time there as well. So you're gonna have to think about not doing it for every event or every race, and it will let you train more in total through the year, hopefully boosting your fitness. If you've got any questions, make sure you drop them down below. And if you haven't already, then make sure you subscribe for plenty more useful training info, training tips, real world advice, and general badass mountain bike content.